Welcome to another episode of the Quiet Work podcast, where we talk about the behind the scenes, the quiet work that no one usually likes to talk about, of what are the ingredients of building a great company in 2025 and beyond. I personally believe that everyone and everything deserves a second chance, a second life. And when it comes to giving second life, your solar systems and your investment in renewable energy deserve a second chance as well. I brought an expert when it comes to giving new life, your solar investments, your solar systems that you manage. Cesar, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about your company? We'll start
Yeah,
with that.
thanks. Thanks, Matt. Pleasure to be on. Cesar Barbosa, founder and CEO of NuLife Power Services. We're a California based company and we service mostly commercial and industrial systems, very little residential. And our niche is just that, to bring new life to the aging infrastructure in America, specifically for commercial solar systems. So, what does that mean exactly? I go and I tell my friends and family, I do not sell new install, and they look at me, well, you've been 17 years. What do you mean you don't install solar? What do you do then? Right. So it's one of those tricky conversations. But I mean, you nailed it. 17 years in the industry. I installed it, then I maintained it. And I quickly realized that a lot of these systems that we were installing in the early 2000s here in the United States were coming to what we call now end of life. Remember, these panels from the manufacturers, they were meant to live 20, 25 years at most. The reality is that we see that not necessarily being the case, at least not the bulk of it. A lot of these systems are failing, degrading at an earlier state. And so we decided to solve that problem. We've been in business now 5.5 years, and we service proudly the Fortune 500s of America's big utility system owners, developers, asset managers, and developers.
Love it. And I would be curious to hear what actually happens, how the process, as much as you can share on it, how the actually recycling process happens. But before that, I wanted to comment that when I moved to the United States to actually join a solar company, the solar systems that I looked at, like for service purposes, usually were that at that time, so 15 years in operation, some of them 17, 18 years in operation. So you know that sooner or later it will require an upgrade. And I remember the panels that back then they were installing were 100 something watt panels. Now you have 400 plus. In commercial space you have 500, 600 watt panels. So the technology has evolved as well. But yes, I think this is a perfect timing for the recycling part of it and giving a new life. What's the process behind it? Like, how does it work? If you could, I saw one of your recent posts on that beautiful 1.6 megawatt system. Looked perfect. The new wiring, everything. I loved it. So how does the process work when you are doing what you do?
Yeah. So typically what happens is that an asset manager, basically a system owner, they'll reach out to us because they already see the writing on the wall, right? Mostly is it's a central inverter. So these were these big bulky inverters. It's what converts the DC to AC for those folks who might not be in our industry. But it's not what you see on your residential home. These things are like massive. They're like the size of a big green transformer, right? Or bigger in some case. And so that's what we call a central inverter. These central inverters, again, being installed 10, 15 plus years ago, most of them, sadly, those manufacturers are no longer in business. So the warranties are void. There are no replaceable parts. It's been a bit of a black eye in the solar industry that we were having manufacturers left and right go out of business. And then that warranty and those very, very proprietary hardware and software and technology is no longer available. So these asset managers, they've actually done pretty good at being able to salvage and source parts from other aging inverters that are coming offline, right? So imagine like, one inverter will blow up or totally go kaboom. Well, they'll go in and we'll scrap all of the internal parts and then hold them and then try and use them as parts to keep the rest of the fleet alive. Well, eventually you can only do that so many times. And the smarter asset managers, they're realizing, okay, well, it's only a matter of time before we can no longer continue to service this inverter with parts. And so what's the long-term solution? And the long-term solution is what we call repower, which can be a lot of things, right? A lot of folks think of repower as like, okay, I'm going to get rid of the system entirely and bring in something new. That's not the case, or at least that's not what a firm that is dedicated to expanding the life of the system is recommending. Rather, we recommend no, let's look at the system holistically and figure out what can be left in place and what needs to be repowered or replaced, right? And so that can mean something like, for instance, the project that you saw that we posted, that was a governmental project, one that we're really proud of. The racking was in good shape. I mean, very robust racking. We went through some value engineering to make sure that it could still last another 20 years. And it was really good. But that was the only thing that was good. The solar panels, like you said, actually these were less. These were 75-watt panels.
Whoa.
Part of the system was 75 and the other part was 175 panels, right? And so the panels had to be replaced, the DC wiring has to be replaced, the combiner boxes all the way to the central inverters, and even the transformers and the switch gears had to have been replaced. And so we go in there surgically and we recommend, okay, this can be left in place, this needs to be replaced, here's a rough order magnitude estimate, and we help with the engineering all the way to the execution. But I guess that's the process. You come to us with the system, with an asset, show us some of those metrics. Is the system performing well? What's your strategy as a system owner? Usually they're smart investors, so they're tracking their assets to some degree. What they need is a specialist to come in and being able to tell them from boots on the ground, no, don't do this, do this. We'll save money here, and this is the safer, most feasible way to get some more power and a longer life on this investment.
What happens with the extra power? So you replace, assuming you're not replacing the 75 watt or 175-watt panels with another 175-watt panels, you're installing better product, right? So what happens with that extra power? Are you making this essentially the system size smaller to essentially make sure that you have this similar power production, or is there output, bigger output desired? I can imagine if this is a governmental project, but if it's not a governmental project, all of a sudden you were producing, let's say, 100,000 kilowatt hours. Now you're producing 200 or more, 300,000 kilowatt hours, right? So what happens with the extra power? Is it desired, or is there a different approach to that?
Yeah, great question. It's a very nuanced kind of solution. So remember, we're very limited by the utility agreements that are in place, right? It's a limitation, but it's also a very keen opportunity on how to like really leverage these investments. So utility agreement has already capped you at a percentage kilowatt output. So to answer your question, in most cases, we're not trying to, they give us a tolerance of about 10%. So we can yield about 10% more than the original agreement. But anything beyond that, we trigger new utility agreements, potentially new PPAs. So it becomes a longer of a conversation. And here in California, it's a big sticky conversation because we recently passed a new NEM agreement, which really makes solar unattractive without energy storage, as you know, right? And so, no, the real key, when possible, it's not always possible, but I would argue that we should try to leverage this as much as possible, is to repower the system close to its utility capacity, and so we replace it we replace it one for one. So if it's a 1.6, we'll go 1.61 if at all, right? So maybe it's a 7,000 75-watt panels. We might now go with 2,400-watt panels. Don't quote me on that path, but that's the emphasis, right? Same power yield, new technology, but trying to leverage those original utility agreements.
That makes sense. I was almost expecting that, because I could imagine with now the output that you can get from the new technology panels is incredible in some cases, especially in California. I mean, technology over the last 20 years or 15 years has developed significantly, and it's just the beginning. It seems like it's getting better and better, right? So that's interesting that one thing you mentioned, the regulations. Interesting that the regulations make it a bit more tricky or harder or unattractive for the investors in clean energy than the opposite, to make it easier, because the technology gets better. We need it. We still electrify. The electrification of everything is continuously happening, right? We have electric vehicles everywhere. You have all the devices that you need to power up in your household, in your business. If you're operating a fleet of cars, you have most likely electric vehicles that you're going to switch over to. It's just a matter of time, or if you're already using that, it's happening. So what's your take? Why would the regulators make it more difficult and less attractive to
Yeah,
get? solar space.
Yeah, it's a very contentious argument, right? Because you're 100% right. We have these crazy goals of meeting net zero, especially here in California. But it's, I mean, it's a lieu of things, right? I mean, let's go more and more solar, more energy, more incentives, more rebates, more this. But then we fail to upgrade our grid and we can't stabilize the grid. So now we're asking to be shut down our power, or we don't have enough power to charge our vehicles, right? As it relates to regulations, man, it's so difficult to get through that red tape. Like, you'd be amazed on some of these more utility ground mount systems. We can find projects delayed months and months for a simple turtle, for all intents purposes, for some kind of a restriction, a very rare species, a rare plant, erosion control. Look, I'm not saying that some of those things aren't important, but I do think, without a doubt, and a lot of solar folks aren't going to appreciate that I say this, but solar has gotten super regulated. It's super heavy on the red tape, and it does create a huge friction. I mean, LA, I forget what the term they have a third party verification. It's kind of an inspecting outfit that manages all of the LA school districts, and it's like impossible to get through their installs, right? And so they condense it to a very limited few operators, mostly union halls, mostly union outfits that have the ability to fund these long studies and these regulations and have engineering people and legal people on their teams. But for a regular operator, a contractor, they make it almost impossible to get some of these systems to the finish line. And in fact, it's probably been one of the detrimental things in the industry. Get this. So 10 years ago, I remember that there was only one party as it related to solar. We started with EPCs, so installers, right? So everybody was an installer. We were selling and engineering and installing our systems. And then throughout the years, now we see an uptick in O&M. So now we realize, okay, these systems are not set it and forget it. Now they require service, they require maintenance. Okay, so then overnight, it feels like $1 billion industry comes out of nowhere, which is O&M, right? And then what happens is that EPC starts becoming a very constrained operation. And so now we see a lot of the good EPCs start transitioning to development. So it's not anymore we're selling and engineering and installing. Now it's just we're selling, we're third partying the engineering, and then we're subbing it out to an install. Does that make sense? So then all of a sudden, all of the EPCs are gone. So now you have everybody heavily installing and selling, but the installers are no longer there because it's really hard to maintain a construction company with all of these regulations. And so what does that cause? That caused more workload on the few EPCs that are left to do a bunch of work, which turns into burnout a lot of times. It turns into a massive need for more labor, which God knows that one of the things we haven't done well in this country has been to enhance the blue collar trades. And so we have this major boom of needing more solar installers, but we can't keep up with the training, and we got to go sell. So what do you have? You have a bunch of shoddy installed systems by an undertrained crew, right? Now you couple their bad engineering, manufacturers going out of business left and right, and then poor maintenance. You have a crisis, which is, I call it the Department of Energy calls it the $100 billion crisis. I call it the $100 billion opportunity. But now we have gigawatts of PV that now need attention, and that's essentially what NuLife operates. Right? We repair, we replace, and repower aging solar systems. And so we're crying and saying, hey, I'm not necessarily a big fan of the big beautiful bill and it clashing all these incentives out of place. But the reality is that the incentives were used to catalyst a new form of energy, right? Not to sustain it forever. And then folks will argue, well, we've done it the same with fossil fuels. Well, that's not my argument. First of all, fossil fuels has been the only primary source of energy, so we needed to incentivize. Otherwise, we would all die. But if we're introducing a new technology that's meant to be competitive, at some point those incentives should be rolled back. But what happens is that, like I said a minute ago, we get super top heavy in regulations, which makes it almost impossible to install some of these systems anymore. And so then it just creates this huge ripple effect of, and I made a post that went viral the other day, that I'm predicting that 50% of systems installed prior to 2016 are not going to make it beyond 2030. But you'll be surprised if they make it by 10 years without the need for some major retrofit there's some major reinfusion of capital. And that's a shame. I'm not proud of it, but I'm here trying to create a solution to it.
Yeah, I like it. And there's an opportunity in every crisis, and that's where that's what we have to, what smart people have to leverage. And I like, I think it's a great timing for it as well. And also, as you were explaining it, somehow it led me to my own conclusion that perhaps it's a one or maybe two, maybe even three steps back, so we can make 5 or 10 steps forward in the over the next decade or two. So maybe there's something to it. It's like you said, there's a lot of red tape. I hear some people call it even green tape, because all of those institutions, be it governmental institutions or for-profit institution, they all obviously are working. They don't work for free. So that's, all of those steps could be simplified, and will be simplified at one point. It has to be, because it's just the way it is, right? And I like to always, we talked previously before hitting the record button about grabbing things that work for different industries and bringing it, applying it to our industry, right? So in solar, I like to always compare solar across different continents. So I come from Europe originally, so that was my first touch with solar as well. We have some partners in Australia, so it's different. But in Europe, the approval time for approval is, I would say, I don't know when I say the numbers, but actually I had one guest who said that the average time just to get plants approved in the United States was 27 days, versus over there it can be done pretty much on, I think, average like 4 or 5 days average. So that means that you can get, obviously we're not talking about commercial because that requires more labor, more attention, but on a residential side, for example, you can sell a system and get it installed next week and get it up and running, operating next week, versus in the United States. I don't know if there's a state that would allow this to happen with 18,000 authority having jurisdictions that we have in the United States. So there's definitely room for improvement, and I appreciate you sharing that. I'm glad you're going viral with these posts, because that sparks the conversation, that invites people to have a dialogue about that, and hopefully some of those people that will hit that like button are part of the legislative part. Perhaps they're part of the meetings that they need to be in, and they'll bring that up at the right time. So
Yeah,
good job.
what's funny? I actually got the attention of a senator from one of those posts, and I actually had to talk. I had like a brilliant, incredible conversation for north of an hour. We spoke a lot of things, but specifically as to what was happening. As most senators are, they're responsible for land acquisition and how they're going to manage the state's cash flow in a sense. And so his concern was like, okay, we're getting ready to lease this land. They're telling me that you kind of set it and forget it. But this man had been in oil and gas for many, many years, and he'd done really well for himself. And he realized, like, look, there's nothing as set it and forget it. And so he saw the post and he wanted to talk and learn a little bit about what he should be looking for. But look, man, ultimately, I'm a blue collar guy, right? I can't tell you necessarily what's going to happen in 5 years and the politics, it's shifting left and right. This administration might go, the new one might come in and might want solar, and then the rebates are right back at it, right? Do I think that's healthy? No, not really. I mean, it's so unhealthy to be able to make these drastic changes, because investors can't have a long-term perspective on what to do with the money, right? And so it creates this stop and go. And then look, we see it here at the ground level. It's not these conversations, and I'm having them on a daily basis, because one of the things that we're launching through our NuLife network partner is basically guiding and developing local contractors to be able to assess and repower in these aging solar systems. There's a lot of operators, contractors who are really good installers who are now seeing this new revenue lane as a massive opportunity. And you see the ones who are actually in this industry for the long term, the long game. They're the ones that are seeing the big picture, and the ones that are less so arguing with me, right? As opposed to when I make these posts and I'm waving the flag and saying, hey guys, we need to slow down a little bit. Like, we've created a mess, quite frankly. They don't want to hear that, because their whole business is central around sell. And so, because I'm having these conversations daily, look, it really hurts people. I mean, it hurts people's lives. I mean, these are 16,000 layoffs in California in the last 12 months. How do you fathom that much layoffs? Like, what can that do to an industry? And what's about to happen here in the next 6 months or so? It's going to be even more drastic than that. So yeah, I think I am excited about, and where I do see a big opportunity is bringing back the blue collar perspective. I think that the companies that are really going to be able to hold on and actually leverage this next wave of what's in, it's a typical life cycle of any technology, I think, right? You have massive deployment, you have your lessons learned, now you have to maintain and operate it. It's just like any technology. Now you have end of life, circularity, like what happens now. And so it's already opened up a multi billion dollar opportunity worldwide, right? So you have folks like me who are more like the specialties in repowering, so like the engineering, the execution, construction. But you also have a lot of facilities that are opening up recycling plants and recycling facilities, right? The volume of silicone that's coming offline today would quite frankly scare you. And so I guess what I would say is that when you're in an industry and you're in an echo chamber of conversation, you start normalizing what's really happening. And so when you make a post that goes viral, usually it catches the attention of outside perspective, really smart folks that's saying, yeah, I thought so. The system at my field has been offline for a year. The system on my home wasn't installed properly and is not working. I don't know what to do. And then you start seeing the industry say, oh, okay, yeah, I guess I've been so stuck in a hole, going that we forgot, like, hey, this is probably not normal. Matt, if I was to tell you, because this is the business that we're in the repair sector, right? Large scale retrofits and repair. If I was to tell you that we're going across portfolios for these Fortune 500s, $500,000 POs to replace the little connectors at the end of the panel, right? So imagine 12 electricians going around multiple job sites doing nothing but replacing these little connectors because there were a defect of some sort. $500,000 PO on 3 sites. What does that do to the financials? What does that do to projections? I don't think it's okay. And again, it's bigger than just the green tape, like you said. It's bigger than just bad engineering or spec on product. It's bigger than just shoddy installation crews who haven't had enough time to be properly trained. It's a bigger reason of why we're in where we're at, right? And so you take the incentives away. There's a reason for that. It wasn't just economical. It was investors starting to see like, hey, is this the best use of our money? Look, just Trump today announced what is $600 billion, or what was it? The 600 billion, the agreement they did with Europe for energy, right? So it's not like, so it's not like we don't have the money. It's just that we didn't do a good enough job of selling. I chat GBT this often, and I said, how many Americans actually support removing the solar clean energy incentives? The majority of them disagree that they shouldn't be taken away, right? But what's more interesting is the uptick on people who definitely didn't want to remove just 5 years ago, who are now saying, yes, we don't need it. It hasn't really given us the consensus that we were looking for. So I wonder if that number is going to continue to trickle up in the next decade or so. We'll see.
I think transparency is the keyword. We need a little bit more transparency with the entire process. The incentives in Europe have never been like they are in the United States, and the systems are probably three times cheaper with the same technology. The process is much simpler, and there are still companies that are thriving there. So why can't we have something here where we have states like Nevada, like California, Arizona, where there's a plenty of sun that can be utilized for that, compared like the yield, for example, how much energy you can get from each kilowatt system here compared to some parts of Europe, where it's still a good option for homeowners, business owners to invest into renewable energy. And for investors, I mean, farms over the last decade have been huge. Solar farms, I mean, not regular farms, but solar farms have been a huge investment vehicle, giving enormous, compared to anything else, like the traditional investment options, enormous returns. And after 20 years, if you can come in, if NuLife can come in and recycle and revive the system that is slowly degrading, because the degradation happens obviously, then this can be a vehicle that will continue, financial vehicle that will continue to print out good results years and decades after that. But I had two ideas or two comments on what you just said. The regarding the connectors and the 500,000 PO. Have you seen those bulldogs, that robots that go through the large installations, large installs, and essentially detect what's even the smallest detail like loose wiring and one part of the system, and they go 24/7 except for charging. They're charged without wirelessly pretty much. So they go back to the station, charge, go back. Immediate communication with them. You can see where they're at. You can see what's happening, and the owners or managers or maintenance company would be notified immediately if something happens. Have you seen those around going around?
I think I know what you're talking about. You're talking about on site. Actually, the owner, the CEO, Derek Chase, he's a buddy of mine. I think he has this robot that he calls the Bulldog. He has the owl. But even if it's not them, I think it's them. It's a brilliant concept. I mean, yeah. Look, the concept there. And matter of fact, this guy was an old O&M guy. And the emphasis on this robotic technology is brilliant because the whole idea and the CEO there, he's built actually one of the first and largest operations and maintenance companies in the country. It was heavily started with residential. Actually, it was a competitor of ours, but then turned good friend. They almost tried to acquire us back in the day. The whole emphasis was how do we reduce the money of having a technicians go out and do these visual inspections, because that's what we had to do. Like we would have to go out with an infrared camera and basically walk row by row by row, and quite frankly miss a lot of things, right? And so he came out with this concept of like doing it robotically with some solid software, and you put them on the roofs as well, and they're able to detect smoke or thermal events. And look, we see it a lot also with drones now, drone aviation and infrared imaging, so much so that it's not just meant to catch hotspots, but it's so intuitive that it tells us now exactly what the issue is. Like it could be a bad MC4 connector, it can be a bad diode, it can be a broken panel. It tells you to a T so that you can then dispatch a technician and do a quick surgical repair, as opposed to saying there's one string, go out there and inspect the whole thing. It's like, no, we're going out there in this sea of 10,000 panels, and we know exactly what needs to be repaired. So yeah, it's been a brilliant technology, and I can only imagine what it's going to look like in the next decade.
Yeah, it's cool to see technology like this and actually make it being extremely useful for investors and obviously for technicians as well. But let's switch gears. We were talking about finances and technical stuff for a long time. What gives you the most fulfillment operating and running NuLife Solar and your company in general?
Look, I'm an entrepreneur, blue collar entrepreneur. At the end of the day, it's a curse and a blessing to be a visionary, right? And so I'm not trying to change the world in any regard, or at least who knows? I mean, indirectly, maybe in some capacity we are, but I'm just trying to build a badass company, man. Like I'm, a typical blue collar dude. Look, man, I grew up Mexican American immigrant, born in Mexico. Was brought to this country as a toddler. Had the privilege to be a naturalized citizen through my parents and doing the things the right way. Growing up in the Bay Area, Northern California, I got sucked into the gangs pretty quick. It was hard to not get sucked into the gangs growing up in the Bay Area in the 90s. It was like if you weren't cool, and some of us just got swallowed in deeper than others. To now be able to run a multi-million dollar business, I mean, it's a dream come true, right? Only in America do you see that. And so my expectations of business is just to build a badass company, a place where folks can come in and bring their best selves. I operate my team at an A-star level team. I want everybody to bring themselves. My standards are crazy high. It kind of drives people nuts a little. It's that. I mean, obviously we have our financial goals and we have all of these metrics and milestones. We operate out of the EOS, all of that. But ultimately, I just want a cool place where I'm like coming in and being at, because we spend most of our time at work. Let's be honest, right? So it's that, man. I won't give you this convoluted, complicated conversation. I want to build a badass company, one that I can be proud of, and whether I keep it forever or not, one that my children will be able to look back and say, hey, daddy grew a badass company.
I love it, man, and I'm gonna steal that line from you, company, because that hits right there. Yeah, I love it. Just to build a great freaking company, you don't have to cover behind a BS of like, hey, I want to change the world or impact this or that large scale. And you will do that if you have a badass company to some degree, right? But if you look at the grand scale of things, if you always like to remember there was in the Daily Stoic. If you ever read Daily Stoic, there was one day where he talks about an astronaut who looked at the Earth from above, and everything was so small, so tiny. So that's a great perspective to have on certain things. And at the end of the day, unless you're part of the top 5 companies in the world, you should focus on building a badass company. That's a good and worthy goal. I like that.
Yeah, I told you, man. There's no gimmicks here. Back to your podcast. What do you call it?
Might
What's
work.
the quiet work, man? I mean, that's in essence is the quiet work, right? Looking outside in, obviously, we're dealing with serious investors and asset managers and really smart people. But from the inside, it's just wanting to build something great. I refer a lot to the book Built to Great. They talk about these big companies that you just mentioned, right? These IBMs of the world. They all started with the real core emphasis to never forget what your mission and your vision and your core values are, and you protect that amongst everything else. And we were talking a little bit before the podcast about my trip, my workshop that I went with Alex Hormozy and the acquisition group, and then prior to that with the Cardone Ventures, and the one thing that they really emphasized on was do not get lackadaisical about the core values. As hard as it is, and it is hard, man. It is hard to bring in an MBA who's been in the industry 12 years and have to reemphasize like, hey, man, we live and we die by our core values. Here they are: extreme ownership, continuous improvement, integrity, and 100% committed to the vision, right? And it's very easy to let your core values, those were my core values, by the way, in case you missed it. It's very easy, shameless plug. It's very easy to consider those a gimmick, but when you go away from that mission and those vision and core values, you start bringing in some folks who otherwise shouldn't be brought in, right? And the saying is so true, man. All it takes is one apple to ruin the bunch, and so you have to protect the why, and that's the why for us. It's just to build a badass company.
How do you make sure? Let me try to make sure I ask it clearly enough because it's very, very important to me personally. So I would love to hear your thoughts on it. How do you make sure that when you hire someone, you explain the core values and they agree to the core values? They even reaffirm you that those are the core values that they value and so much value here that they appreciate and they live up to. And then they're a couple of months in, it shows otherwise. How do you prevent it from happening to make sure that you don't get those, how you said, bad apples in the
Yeah.
on the tree, that beautiful tree that you're growing, the baddest tree that you're growing there?
Yeah, yeah. Look, I don't think, let me say this. I don't think no matter what you do, right? And there's always something more that you can do. You'll never really know until you know, right? That's just the reality. You can go through 100 interviews. Trust me, I've tried it. You can go through a bunch of questions and questionnaires. You can meet the person's wife or husband, references. I mean, you can go the whole 9 yards, and ultimately you'll never know until you. Now, I will say this, because I can bore you here and tell you to do all those things, which is all the things that we already know and we learn and we read from, right? And they're important, they're useful. I would say this, and this is the quiet truths. Keep an eye out for the red flags. Be very keen to some of those red flags. They're very subtle during an interview process because you almost hear it, and something flickers in you, or your subconscious alerts you like, hey, something he said, something how he responded. It can be something as a simple facial expression can be a red flag, and those red flags are the ones that ultimately will show up later down the line, right? So I think that's one key principle. One way that we do it here is that we'll have a interview. So we will have 2 or 3 folks interview the folk at the same time, and we're all listening for different responses and different answers, right? And when the interview concludes, we'll come back and we say, okay, what you were listening for HR, I was listening for finance, I was listening for operational and culture. What are some of the red flags, right? Because in an interview, it can be very easy to miss something, and so you utilize those interviews in a very tactical way. It's not just an opportunity where you come in and high fives and talk about how great they are, how great we are. I mean, it's like very keen conversation, listening to those red flags, and then praying to God that is not a disastrous lawsuit waiting to happen, because that's the God honest truth, Matt. You just never know until you know. And when you do know, I will also emphasize this, and it took me a while not to realize this, but to have the courage to do this. Hire slow, fire fast. I've done pretty good with hiring slow. That part I've done pretty good. Not always so well with firing quickly until most recently, right? And now I realize that the quicker that you, and I don't like to say fire, I say release. The quicker you release someone, you release them to their truest purpose, because it doesn't mean that they're a bad person. They just weren't the right fit for your organization, right? Let's be clear. So fire quickly, in other words, right? Now, one last thing. This part we have a lot of fun with, and it's kind of a model here as it relates to interviewing. We say during an interview process, my job, everybody's job, if there's interviewing, their sole job is to scare that candidate away.
I like it.
Yeah. Like, we're going to tell you why it sucks here. We're going to tell you how hard it is here. We're going to tell you how unrealistic the milestones are, and the deadlines are, and what the expectations are. So much so that you got to be really crazy to want to work here. Because if they elect to want to work here, we realize that when they walk in, we're hoping that things aren't that bad, and they'll realize, like, okay, things weren't as bad as they were, right? But we've already done our job to try to scare them away. I feel like a lot of companies or even interviewers do the reverse, where it's like, well, let me tell you how great it is. Like, I'm selling you here on why you want to work. Yeah, there's got to be a part of that, but know when and where. But there's more power, more strength into telling them how hard it's going to be, how high the expectations are going to be, and that you're tracking them on a 30, 60, 90 basis. This isn't a thing with like, we're going to see how it goes in 6 months. That's not, and that's the other thing I learned from Alex Hormozy, right? You'll see a lot of these executives or management folks. And yeah, there is an onboarding time and all that, but you got to have some real quick wins. You got to have some real key indicators. And then one more, and I know I said that last time, but one more thing. Another thing that I learned a while ago that's really useful. We call this the trial hire. Okay, it basically means that before you leave your company there where you've been for 5-7 years and do a whole transition and relocate your family only to find out that you are a good fit. Before we do that, let's do a trial run. I'll pay you. Give me your total salary amount, your full compensation. We'll do a pro rate on an hourly rate on what that means. So let's say it's $200K, or $125. I'll pay you $125 an hour. Here are a few real life scenarios, a few real life cases of what actually your work will look like here. Let me see what you can do. Here's a key thing, man. I have seen folks who've like just harped on how great they are, how experienced they are, how badass they are, that when I test them like that, they'll say something like, well, I don't need to prove myself to anybody. I've been doing this for a long time, right? You'll hear things like that. And at first it's like, well, man, am I really not leveraging his time and his expertise? But then you'll have that same conversation with someone else with a similar pedigree, only a little bit more humble. And when you say that to them, they light up. They say, oh, you want to put me on the test run? I like this. Yeah, let's do it. Let me show you what I can really do. And that has been the key differentiator, and a way to like make sure that you're not doing yourself and them a disservice by not bringing them in if they're not the right fit.
A great concept there. One thing I remembered from Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger, one of them, they got it from one of their top CEOs also. So when he was hiring, instead of meeting at the office, they would go to the local restaurant or wherever they usually go, and like a low key place, nothing fancy, and they'll tell the waiter that they're going to have an interview, and to mess up the order, do some mess around the table, or create some chaos around it, right? So, and they would watch how the candidates react to something super simple. How do they treat that person that messed it up? How do they approach, normal, typical, I mean, not typical, but scenario in like normal life scenario, not related to work? And what is their attitude towards others and other people, maybe below them in some cases, the hierarchy in the company. And that was something that the story that stuck with me, because that's true. I mean, you gave us an example of someone who has a big ego that you're trying to test them. They're gonna tell you that they've done it all, they know it all, and you either hire them at a top rate or you're gonna miss out on that opportunity, right? And then you have someone else who will appreciate it. And you see it across all disciplines, in business and in sports as well. You have some people have that attitude, and it's good to have it until it's not, until it's something happens and you're going to, bag for that opportunity again, but it's too late. So don't burn those bridges because of your ego, in other words.
I love that story. Yeah, great. Thanks for that's a good one. I don't know if I would get that creative, but let me just how about this one? Just meeting someone's significant partner, their wife or husband, right? You'd be surprised, man, how much a significant other is willing to open up and share. Right. Sometimes I feel as a candidate, they're almost pressured to want to take the job. They're almost questioning it, but you never know what might be happening on the other end of that relationship with their significant other. So we've had conversations, and we make it a rule here for like executive roles here that we will meet with their significant other prior to like really making a commitment, and we'll straight up ask the wife or the husband like, hey, do you really think this is the place for them? And you'd be shocked on the things that they're willing to tell you, because ultimately, look, if they really value their spouse, they don't want them to take a job just for the sake of taking a job. I mean, when we're more specifically talking about like by then, hopefully you've already done enough interview process to at least filter out that it's an A star player. So then that spouse recognizes what their partner brings to the table, and so they're not going to sugarcoat the position that they're shooting for, right? And so you can learn a lot from that significant other. And if they do align, which is what you're hoping for, right? It's also your opportunity to sell them on the mission and the vision, right? Because guess what? When you have the spouse in line with the vision and what it's going to take, you have that candidate's full attention and demeanor, right? So it's a powerful two-way streak to like really one, filter any real red flags. I haven't, in all transparency, I haven't had one tell me flat out, no, I don't think that they should take this job. But I've heard stories from my mentors. I heard this one actually was taught to me by Dave Ramsey from the Dave Ramsey radio show, right? So, and he mentions the stories where their spouses have said, no, actually, no, Dave, I don't think this is the right role for him. I told him that is not what him. He should be doing this and that and that. And yeah, it can be a little awkward at first, but the whole point of it is like, hey, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that God has a different role for you. So don't make the mistake of coming in here only to find out that it was a bad mistake.
Yeah,
that's a good one to keep.
You brought up the power of questions. Tony Robbins talked about it a lot. The power of asking question the right person, and in this case, your spouse would be, or their spouse would be the right person. Simple question like this: as you said, do you think it's the right place for him to work or your spouse to work at? Can open up so many different ideas that you never, or perspectives that you never thought or otherwise you wouldn't get from them. Cesar, how do companies find out, or investors find out about NuLife Solar? Or how do you find them in the market, in the market space with, let's say, a rather low trust industry?
Yeah. Look, something that I'm proud of, but also realizing now that there's also a restriction. 99% of our work has been through word of mouth and referrals. Yeah. A lot of folks don't believe that, because I happen to have a bit of a following on LinkedIn as a voice of reason, right? Maybe a little controversial at times, but just speaking the truth on what I see, I think is what created the following on LinkedIn. But yeah, I mean, look, you don't get to do business with Fortune 100s without a good reputation, a good track record, right? So you have to start there. I'm very proud of the reputation we've built, really proud of the work we've done, the lessons that we've had to learn the hard way. But they can mostly all find me on LinkedIn. We're pretty active there. We're mentioning a lot of the work that we're doing. We're trying to take a lot of the lessons from the Alex Hormozis of the world. He says this: give away your biggest, deepest secrets in a good way, right? I mean, nobody wants to hear your closet secrets, but give away your enterprise secrets. Let the world know what it is that you can actually do for them. And so I'm trying to live by that philosophy. I'm trying to create as much value, as much lessons learned as I can, in hopes that when the time comes, that these investors, these asset managers, these system owners realize like, okay, this guy, one, knows what he's talking about. Sounds trustworthy. He's got a good track record. Let's give him a shot. So LinkedIn is the number one way to connect with us.
LinkedIn, online reputation, and obviously proof of concept, which you share about, and in a great way and easy to understand and consume. So if I wasn't related to the solar space in some shape or form, I would understand what value you bring to the table just by following some of your content. So great job on that. I like it. And I like to always say that or recently say that there's a second wave, maybe even third wave, but I would say second wave of content marketing. In the beginning, whatever you posted on Facebook when it was new, and then Instagram, it would reach significant amount of people, even organically, right? Without any paid ads. And then the algorithm started to change. The advertising took over. The algorithm didn't favor any interest-based content. It was rather follower-based content. So if you were following more than 10 people, the algorithm get confused, and you would constantly see the same creators, same people, and some family members, what have you. And then Facebook algorithm completely died out, and it starts changing where, especially for companies, it became almost not that relevant to post content because you wouldn't get much reach. You wouldn't reach new people for that's the most part. Now with the algorithm changing towards favoring or towards the algorithm that's favoring the interest. So it's based on your interest, not based on the people you follow. So if you're interested in seeing how solar is going to shape after the new bill and all the changes are happening, you're going to see that type of content. If you're interested in Alex Hermosi and building businesses, leadership, hiring, or releasing fast, firing fast, and all that type of content, you're going to see that type of content moving forward because that's what you're interested in. And obviously, TikTok is the first platform that shaped this new direction, that mastered it, because you see content as so addictive because it's so something that you're interested in most of the times, and then all the other platforms start following suit. So I think this is the second wave of content. So it's, if you tell me that you're able to grow word of mouth in such a complicated process, companies that obviously investors that we're talking about multi-million dollar deal working with Fortune 500 companies, they're listing senators that listen to your content and respond to that content, then obviously there's that applies to everyone else that is trying to build badass companies and badass businesses. Then it's a good sign for you to follow people like Cesar and start posting value content out there.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, man. I totally agree. It's almost a little ironic because if you go to my Instagram account, it's weak. If you go to my Facebook account, it's like my mom and all her sisters, and and I'll share the same content, that I do on LinkedIn. I heard a statistic and I forget what number it is, but it's several billion users on LinkedIn, by the way, all with updated titles, right? So you always know more about someone by following their LinkedIn than you will on any other social media platform. But out of the billions of users, I think it's like less, man, I forget, but it's less than 3%. It's a very, very minute percentage of people who are actually creating content.
Yeah.
And it actually has a lot of social media gurus perplexed. Like they don't truly understand why that is, but I do. And I would reckon to say that I think the biggest reason for that is the fear that people have in expressing their ideas on a professional network like LinkedIn, right? Because as much as you talk to any business leader, they know that the content creation is a thing, right? I think on LinkedIn, because you're facing a different crowd, this, like, I don't know if it's like imposter syndrome or just this fear of saying something and looking foolish. And so if you were to ask me, well, Cesar, what recommendation would you give these folks? I would say, look, everybody, every post that I post now, I feel the same fear. I feel like, oh man, is this the one that's gonna like get me sued, gonna drop a big client or something, right? And it's the reality is that as long as you approach this content with truth, with conviction, with having another big thing on LinkedIn is a lot of folks are afraid of, especially when it comes to moral kind of situations, right? That's happening around the world. A lot of folks seem to have a no opinion kind of aspect, right? And look, to each their own. But as a man of faith, I would argue that not saying nothing is a decision in and of itself. And there's a saying that when good people do nothing, evil multiplies, right? And so it's a combination of all those things why I think people don't use this incredible, powerful platform to speak their truth. Because here's the thing, last thing I'll say on this, right? The more vulnerable you are, the more authentic that you are on LinkedIn. Yes, it will inevitably push people away, but guess what it does in return? It brings the right people into your fold, right? So you can create a LinkedIn post that is trying to attract the masses, But let's be honest, like as the old saying goes, right? We make money to impress people we don't like or don't care about. They don't like or care about us. As opposed to dwindling your message to true conviction and true authenticity. And yeah, you might offset the majority of people who are following you or could follow you or could do business with you, but you're attracting a very select few of folks that could turn out to be multi generational, multi million dollar opportunities.
Yeah.
Especially in this game in the B2B enterprise world, you don't need 1,000 clients. A handful of clients can be an amazing career.
100%. I agree with you. And that's, you hit the nail on the head there with all the insecurities. And then I feel like this is spot on. I actually had this question going over my head over the weekend because some people aren't afraid at all. And maybe they are afraid, but they still did that despite their fear of like expressing their opinion in a controversial topic. But you know, it gets attention, and obviously once it's attention trading times that we live in, right? Everyone wants that attention and then figures out how to get attention. Well, expressing your own opinion could be a good way to get attention. You will get 80-20 or probably Pareto's rule. 80% of people that will not agree with you, but that 20% that agrees might be that multi-million dollar deal that you're hoping to get. Final two questions for you, Cesar. We are approaching 1 hour already. Great conversation so far. Well, you had an opportunity to sit across the table from Cesar from very beginning when you starting your career. What advice would you give him?
Realize that there is a season of learning and a season of earning. And sometimes they're not the same. And be okay with that.
Season of earning and season of learning. Yeah, big one, big one. And now I know why you're going on those masterminds and networking with smart individuals. Yeah, love it. My final question to you: what are you excited the most in the near future? Any interesting projects that you are hoping to start or finish, or anything else in your corner?
Yeah, let's see. Got a lot of things to be excited about. We've been doing a lot more outreach to local technical trade schools. So actually, this week I'm going to go and present to another cohort of students. So it's really cool to sit in front of them and tell them a story, right? And I have the ability to be my authentic self, and I can speak the way I want to speak. I'm not an instructor, so they can't, you know what I mean, go to these classrooms. So I'm excited about that. Um, I'm also excited about this next version of NuLife Power. We're making a pretty heavy transition into a more national presence, not through boots on the ground, but more through an owner's rep position, where now we've been saying more no to work than we were able to say yes to, right? Because we were mostly here in California as a real kind of an executional team, right? But as this industry continues to evolve and as our name continues to get out there, we realize that we cannot continue to say no. And so we took on this new approach. We call it the NuLife Network Partnership Method, which is now we can work with these asset managers to come to us, give us their systems. We can look at them, provide preliminary value engineering and rough order magnitude estimates so that they can start forecasting what to do with their systems. We weren't able to do that before. We're offering that now as a service. And then at the same time, we're developing, training, and equipping local contractors, local operators, and bringing those two people to the table, right? There's these contractors and operators who want to open up a new service lane, who otherwise are struggling with new installations because of what's happening in the sector. And we're teaching them what we've learned the hard way on how to execute decommissioning and repowering projects, bringing those asset managers and saying, hey, we have a contractor in Georgia or in Maryland or in New York or in Texas. They're vetted, they're tethered. We've helped you with the value engineering. Now let us make this recommendation. It's kind of tying to our passion for building a badass company through engineering and execution and that. But at the same time, it talks to my passion on developing other blue collar operators. So we announced it a couple of weeks ago, and it's been getting massive traction. It got a little scary at first, but I think it was a sign to say, hey, this is the thing that we're doing next. So we're full steam ahead. And I would say that's what I'm excited about. And then the last thing is I got my two little girls, 2 under 2. And every day is exciting to see how they're developing, how they're changing. And it's been a very tiring, sleepless season, but also very amazing and blissful to be able to experience this with them. My office is 5 minutes from my house. I get to have breakfast with them. I get to go to lunch, have lunch with them, and I get to put them to bed while running a multi 7-figure business. I think I think I'm doing it okay, at least for now. 2 and 9, 2 years old and 9 months old.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
little princess is almost 8 months old. So
Oh yeah, can relate.
big blessing. Yes, huge, huge blessing. Absolutely. I love every second around her. It's something you can't describe. It's so beautiful. But Cesar, I look forward to seeing how your status company is going to evolve and grow and continue to operate and surprise us with new avenues. And I love how you're giving back and stepping on into your leadership role like we all should, and really inspiration for us all. And I got a lot of good value from just talking to you, so I can imagine how it is working with you. So yeah, kudos to you and your team on those magnificent projects. I definitely want to make sure that I'll stick around.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. It's been a pleasure, man. Thank you for the platform.